Welcome to Tammy DeCaro Art. Thank you so much for joining our 1000 and Under collab. And thank you to Jessica Winterstrom, who was our guest artist. And don't forget to join us in August for a big giveaway. I'm teaching at the Fluidart Boutique in Sterling, Virginia, and teaching multiple classes, including this puddle swipe class. So I decided to test a couple of concepts. Our challenge was to do any technique but use negative space. And with swiping, typically you see very little negative space in most types of swipes, or at least in mine in the past. So I was testing multiple concepts here. First, how to get the negative space. Second, how to swipe in a way that would be visually interesting and leave extra negative space. And third, the difference between spreading out a base coat versus tilting off a base coat. So there's a couple of different experiments happening in this video. This is something that I've kind of termed the hashtag swipe. I made a square of my paint ribbons, and I'm swiping only 4 swipes across. And I really enjoyed the effect of this, and using that Payne's gray base made a nice visual interest to those very bright greens, yellows, and oranges. I do this in another piece later in the video as well on a white base, and my swiping material is from Acrylic Tools, which is Tracy Reed Designs on Etsy. I really like these swiping tools. They give you something to hang on to, and they don't suck up the paint like paper towels would. Here's the last and final swipe. I kind of played around with this hashtag style swipe a few times, and here we get a close-up of that swipe. By the way, I taught a full day of swiping classes yesterday in Fort Myers, and if you go to my Facebook page, I'll be sharing some videos of some of the students. It was an amazing day of classes. As always, the students inspire me more than anything else, and we had some really interesting effects and color palettes yesterday in our class. So I'll be sharing those photos on my Facebook page as well. So here, I leave this center square negative, but because I spread out the base coat instead of tilting it off, once I spin this piece, it does kind of expand, and you lose track of the hashtag style swiping direction. So I decided to try it with a tilted off base, and this video is really about which is better, the spread base, which leaves a little more paint on the surface, or tilted off base. And I try it in a couple of different types of swipes. Now you still see the hashtag square in the middle and the detail of those swipes, but as I spin it, it moves to the outer edges of the canvas, and you can tell here where it didn't spin off of one side. And one question I had recently from a student was, does it matter if your canvas is centered on the spinner or off-centered? Does that help in any way? And the answer to that is yes, it does help. If you have an area that's not moving as equally as the rest, setting your canvas in an off-center placement will help expand it. See the difference there? So what I did was the hashtag line that was not spreading fast enough, I put on the downside of that spinner. In other words, I put it on the outside so that when it spun, it specifically spun that outside section. Now it spins the whole canvas too, but, and of course with negative space, I can't just leave it negative. I do what I call not so negative space, where I bring in some little details or ribbons of color, just because I really didn't like the size of that very large negative square. And so I'm just taking my spatula, dipping it a little bit in my swiping Payne's Gray, which is mixed 3 parts Australian Floetrol, 1 part paint, and then thin down with water. Here's another close-up of that last hashtag swipe. I just love the way these vibrant colors really shine against that Payne's Gray. All right, so here is a hashtag swipe design on a tilted off base. So I spread my base like normal, but I tilted all of it off. In fact, I did extreme tilting and shaking to get as much of the base off as I could. And the purpose of this experiment was to determine whether or not the tilted off base helped keep the structure of the cells more intact and the design more intact. Even though I spin this as well, the tilted off base was more successful. So here I am. I'm going to hashtag swipe. And I really love these swiping tools. I think they give a much better broad swipe versus a paper towel, or even the thin plastic that you can cut up to use like a report cover or page protector. This is on a white base, so you see more vibrancy in the colors. And I really enjoyed doing this. Now, I had a few areas that didn't swipe as well, so I'm going with my smaller swiping tool and just adding a little bit more interest. And I liked using this white base because even though in some areas I only had the Payne's Gray on my swiping tool, it still created some visual interest because the Payne's Gray swiped over the white. So there you see some of that detail. And I was really trying to use orange, yellow, and green in a swipe because it's much easier to use colors that normally would maybe not go well, for instance, in a flip cup or where they might over mix with each other. You could get some mud. With swiping, I find that those colors don't mix too much, and it's easy to use a palette that's a little bit less monochromatic and more contrast. And again, here I've got that negative space that I just can't leave alone. Adding a little bit of a swipe there to pull that unswiped paint. And then, of course, I have to do a doodle in the middle. You can avoid this by making sure that the inside part of your square is the first part that you swipe, and then swipe out. That's what I learned from this experiment. I do really like the direction of the 4 different swipes creating that square, but of course the square being in the middle is super noticeable to me. And again, I'm going to bring in kind of with my palette knife some not so negative details to this portion. And of course, there I go. I spun too fast because I have my board on top of a spinner. So I was kind of doing 2 different things there. So here is a puddle swipe. And in this case, there is no base coat. I'm laying down puddles of paint. And my paint mixture is fairly thin. It's a little bit, probably a tad thicker than most people's swipe or a blowout Dutch pour type of consistency. You don't see any trace when you drip the paint off the stick. It looks like it goes straight into the paint, but it's just barely on that edge, and it's not as liquid as most artists that I see. So in this particular case, it's the puddle swipe. I'm trying to keep the puddles in the center so that I can have some negative space on the top and the bottom. And then this is one of the classes I'm teaching at the Fluidart Boutique in Sterling, Virginia, August 6th through 8th. The puddle swipe as well as a diptych swipe, so swiping across two canvases. Either we're gonna swipe in multiple ways in that class with lots of tools, both a spatula, which is what I use here in this puddle swipe, as well as the acrylic pouring tools, swiping tools, and whatever else you want to bring. I experimented a lot with swiping this week and really enjoyed finding out what different materials would give me in my effects. Also, if you've struggled with swiping in the past because of arthritis or shaky hands, I have some solutions for that. And I'm actually going to release a video soon on just acrylic pouring with arthritis, shaking hands, Parkinson's, essential tremor, those kinds of things. I was a healthcare professional. I specialized in a lot of senior living environments and memory care where we dealt a lot with Parkinson's and tremors. So, and I personally have rheumatoid arthritis, so I've adapted a lot of my tools to accommodate for that. And I realized yesterday in teaching my class that that might be information that people are interested in. So I'll be doing a video on that soon. But here I use a number 11 palette knife, which I got from Fluidart Co. And it's an offset palette knife, which makes a difference in how you swipe. I'm swiping over my original one and trying to leave negative space there. And of course, have, as always, a few areas of paint in the middle that did not get swiped. So I'm bringing in a small swipe with that spatula. And there are times where adding some ribbons of color are helpful, and again creating that not so negative space. It's negative space, but it's not so negative space because you bring in just a little swipe of ribbon of color. And on that orange that I just did, there's nothing in that. That's just the orange paint that I was using. There's no Australian Floetrol. The interesting thing about swiping is just like with most fluid art mediums, agitation is the secret to the cells. So you have to agitate it in some way. And just taking regular paint and swiping it over a very thin base coat with thin paints will give you cells. So you don't necessarily need Australian Floetrol or any other special chemical other than regular American Floetrol paint and water. The difference when you get into using silicones, or which I never use, but silicones or Australian Floetrol, is the integrity of your cells, the size of your cells. So the conclusion of my little experiment is that the tilted off base is better, as well as no base. And I really want to thank you for watching. Thank Jessica for being our guest artist this month. And come and check us out next month for our big giveaway. Thank you.